I want to say welcome to the people who are joining us online, live online this morning. If you want to follow along in the scriptures, we're going to be looking at 1 Timothy chapter 4. Those of you who are here in the audience today, you've got your bulletins, and those verses are already printed there. If you want to follow along in your hard copy, that's great. Electronic device, whatever. 1 Timothy chapter 4, and we'll be getting there in just a little bit. I saw a movie not too long ago, this past year, and it was a box office disaster. In fact, they warned us ahead of time that it wasn't that good, but there was an illustration in this movie that made it worth the whole movie for me. And I'm guessing, since it was such a dud, that maybe you didn't hear this illustration, so I'm going to use it, okay? In this part of the movie, the guy who's the professor, he happens to own the school for people who have very, very, very special abilities and needs. He's talking to this young girl who's very apprehensive about her gifts. Can I say it that way? She's very troubled about her special powers. And so this professor gives her a pen. And he hands it to her and says, I want to give you a gift. And so she takes the pen, and you can kind of see she's a little like, what's this all about? Why are you giving me a pen? And his comment is, it's a gift. Seriously, I just want you to have it. But I want you to understand this. It's totally up to you now because I've given it to you. You can do with it whatever you want. And, a pen, you can write some nice things. You can write some beautiful letters. You can do a lot of nice things with a pen. He said, but you can also take this pen and try to poke somebody's eye out with it. It's just up to you how you use the gift. See the point he was trying to make her to this young lady who had obviously a gift. I really like this. I like it on so many different levels because all of us have some sort of abilities. All of us have some sort of talents. All of us have some sort of opportunities in life, right? And those opportunities, when they come our way, guess what? Sometimes something really beautiful can happen, or sometimes we can hurt people. Well, why am I bringing this up? Why do I want you to think about this? Because I think an easy argument to win would be the greatest gift ever given to humanity wasn't just a gift of Jesus Christ, God sending Jesus into this world. It wasn't just one given out there. Now, I think you can make a very effective argument that gift was given to His church, and we, His people, are the ones who get to represent Him to the world. And as such, we represent the most beautiful gift that has ever been given to humanity. And when it's properly presented, I'm telling you, folks, the world has never been the same. Much better when Christianity has properly been presented. You talk about cultures, you talk about people for the last 2,000 years who have been richly blessed and made better because of something they've received. It's people who have accurately received God's gift of life through Jesus as presented by His people. I'm trying to belabor that point because I don't like to talk about this next point, but it's a fact. Last 2,000 years, an awful lot of people have been hurt. And they've been hurt because this gift has not been accurately presented. Here's the way Paul talks to Timothy about it. In the very first chapter, he talks about this wonderful gift of the forgiveness of sins made possible through Jesus Christ. He came to forgive sinners, and he says it this way twice in the first chapter. He says, He came to forgive sinners of whom I am the worst. Do you remember Paul saying that? I just love this because here's the visual image I get. If you picture people in a mass of humanity separated from God, somebody's further than everybody else, right? So people are separated from God, but if you go to that person who's further away than anybody else, the Apostle Paul says, that's me. And the point he's making is, listen, if God can save the one that is further away than anybody else, what does that mean for everybody else? You get the implication of this? This is why this is so important, because inevitably it may be worded a little bit different, but you're going to run into people who say, oh, I've gone too far. Boy, the sins I've committed, they're just too bad. Listen to what the Apostle Paul says. If God is able to save the worst, that means He can save anybody you know in anything you've done, in any situation. Doesn't make any difference what you've done or what you've become or where you find yourself. This is a good message. That's chapter 1. Chapter 4 that we're going to start off with today is where the message goes bad. Instead of helping, it hurts. Chapter 4, 1 Timothy chapter 4. I want to start reading here in the first verse of the 4th chapter. It says, the Spirit clearly says that in later times some will abandon the faith and follow deceiving spirits, things taught by demons. Such teachings come through hypocritical liars whose conscience have been seared as with a hot iron. This sounds pretty bad, doesn't it? Did you get the demonic part at the end of verse 1? The hypocritical liars whose conscience have been seared as with a hot iron in verse 2. For me anyway, it's easy to get caught up in, wow, this is bad, and miss one of the most basic points. One of the most basic points is this: it's a message. Jesus came into the world to save sinners, of whom I am the worst. That's what he says in the first chapter. But you know what? How does Jesus save sinners? It's not just by what he did. There is a truth, and there is a message that needs to be heard and understood and has to be received. So for us to deliver this wonderful gift to people, something has to be said. And what these verses are telling us is that's where Satan takes his stand. That's how he turns the gift into something that hurts, by altering the message. In Huntsville, Texas, there's a very famous prison. As I understand this, it's the oldest prison in the state of Texas. And this prison for years got the nickname the wall separating folk on the inside versus folk on the outside. And one of the reasons it got this nickname and developed this reputation is up until the year 2010, everybody in the state of Texas who was in any kind of prison, before they would release you, they'd send you to Huntsville. So instead of being released from a prison in El Paso or a prison up in Dallas or a prison anywhere else, they would send you to Huntsville. And everybody got released from that one prison. We're talking thousands and thousands of inmates who've been released through the years, right? After 2010, still a large majority, depending on the crime, still go to Huntsville for release. So it's still a major center. But let me tell you why I'm bringing this up. When they release somebody from prison in Huntsville, give them 3 things. Give them a change of clothes, give them a little bit of money, and they give them a voucher. It's a voucher they can take to the bus station to go anywhere, get out of town, right? So can you picture this? On a daily basis, you've got hundreds, sometimes thousands of people released in this community. They got their clothes on. They go and cash the check. They got a little bit of money in their pocket, and then they take that voucher. One of the first things they do is they go to the bus station, to wherever. Would it surprise you to learn that per capita, one of the highest concentrations of prostitutes and drug dealers are found at the bus station in Huntsville, Texas? Would that surprise you? Doesn't surprise me. Saddens me. Doesn't surprise me, because there are certain places where you're going to be more successful at doing. I don't even want to think about that. What I do want to think about is this. There are places where Satan camps out. And here it is. I'll turn it this way so you can see it. Do you know why he camps out here? Let's go back to the very beginning. In book of Genesis, the 3rd chapter, we have the story. Sometimes we refer to it as the story of the fall. And I'm going to brush with broad strokes here. I'm going to go really quick, so check me out on this. Don't just accept it. But here's what happens in the story of the fall. Satan comes in the form of a snake, as a serpent, and he says to Eve, did God really say that you're not supposed to eat from the trees in the garden? Here's Eve's response. Listen to this. She said, oh no, we are allowed to eat from the trees in the garden. There's just one tree in the middle of the garden, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, that we're not supposed to eat or touch. Because if we do, we might die. And I know a lot of times the Hebrew is translated will die, but it really carries with it the idea of doubt. What she really said is we might die. I want you to hear this again. She said, no, we're allowed to eat from the trees. We're just not supposed to eat of that one tree or touch it because we might die. Is that right? Well, if you look at the rest of the story, here's what God really said. God said you're allowed to eat freely. from all the trees in the garden. She left a word out. And you might be thinking, yeah, big deal. She left the word out. She left one word out, freely. And then when she said we're not supposed to eat of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, she also added something there because God never said you're not supposed to touch it. Eve's the one who came up with that. So she left something out, she added something to it, and then this last part where she said we might die, God said, in the day that you eat of it, you will surely die. Changed it just a little bit. It has been pointed out, I think accurately so, that you know what? Adam and Eve were sitting ducks. You know why they were sitting ducks? Because they left a little bit out, they added a little bit to it, and they changed what was there. Why in the world am I bringing this up? I'll tell you why. Because Satan found that tactic effective, and he's been using it ever since. You know what the three reasons are? We're talking about the message here and the way the message gets presented. And what we're going to see here, and he's going to give us some examples in just a minute. We're going to get this very next verse. The three reasons why the message goes bad. Instead of being a wonderful message of hope to people, instead it's hurt people through the years. You know why? Three reasons. Number one, because people added a little bit to it. Number two, they left something out. Number three, they didn't present it accurately. Three basic things, but Satan's been doing it forever. And why would he change his game plan when it works so well, right? Are you ready for these examples? After talking about this demonic influence, that's what it is, a demonic influence, demonic perversion of the message, the gift gone bad. Here's his example in verse 3. Number one, they forbid people to marry. And number two, they order them to abstain from certain foods. Again, real quick, he just throws out two examples there. But can you process this with me for just a minute? In verse 1, he says, the Spirit clearly says, sometime out there in the future, some really bad things are going to happen. You know what those really bad things are? They're going to forbid people to marry, and they're going to tell them they can't eat certain foods. And I just want to make this point right away. That doesn't sound real bad on the surface, does it? Maybe it does. Maybe it does to you. Maybe it's just me. But I'm thinking to myself, this isn't mass murder. You know, this isn't genocide. This isn't, the marriage deal and forbid. But that's the point. That's part of the point. It only takes a little bit of setting your trajectory wrong, of getting a little bit off course, of going just a little bit, and eventually you'll be way off. Right? And so his two examples here they are, forbidding people to marry, and then number two, abstain from certain foods. Has the church done that? Has the church, do you know your church history about what the official stance? Some churches, in fact, even today, some churches make this distinction for priesthood, and I don't have time to talk about that, but they make a distinction about priesthood and say in their churches, if you're a priest, you're not allowed to get married. Did you know that? Did you know other churches have certain stances on marriage issues where they say certain people are not allowed to get married? Well, guess what? God knew that was going to happen. He told us ahead of time it was going to happen. Did you also realize that there are churches that say certain foods you're not supposed to eat? Did you know that one? Okay, I'm assuming you do, so let me try to explain this. How in the world did this happen? First one, I'm going to give you an example from 1 Corinthians chapter 7 because as best I understand it, this is where most of it came from. 1 Corinthians chapter 7, let me say that one more time, the 7th chapter of 1 Corinthians. Why am I emphasizing that? Because that's a passage where Paul, who also wrote the church at Corinth, he's the writer of this, really the Holy Spirit through Paul, right? He's dealing with the church at Corinth. They've asking him a bunch of questions. They reported to him a bunch of issues, and Paul's dealing with them one by one. When you get to the 7th chapter, that's where he talks about marriage. Here's what Paul says about marriage. He says, due to the present crisis. Some translations may word it a little differently, but he says, due to the present crisis, I advise you not to marry. He's not talking about everybody. And he very much made it a point that there's something going on right then and there, which, by the way, he never tells us what it is. But he says, due to the present crisis, I advise you not to marry. And the very next thing he says is, by the way, if you decide to get married, you haven't sinned. He's just giving advice here, and he says, understand this. If somebody decides I'm not going to marry, that's fine. If somebody else decides I'm going to go ahead and get married, he says, that's fine too. I'm just giving you a piece of advice here. And then he adds one more thing. He says, by the way, those of you who can't control your passions, go ahead and get married. because you're not allowed to get involved in this sex thing outside of marriage. So go ahead, get married if the passion's something that you cannot control, right? I've just given you a way overview of what takes place there, but I hope you can see this. No way, by the way, this is the passage that talks about it most clearly. In no way did he say certain people are not allowed to marry. He very much said it's up to you. It's not a sin. You can go either way. In fact, you probably should get married if you can't control yourself. That's what he said. What happened here? Somebody added to it just a little bit. How about this food thing? Now, I'm guessing a lot of you have run into different people on certain days of the week or certain times. I'm not allowed to eat this food. Well, why is that? Because at my church. Well, where in the world did these food restrictions come from? Well, in the Old Testament, a lot of people will point to a lot of passages where there are verses in the Old Testament that talk about certain food will make you defiled. Certain foods are considered unclean, right? That's why I want you to write down Gospel of Mark, chapter 7. Gospel of Mark, chapter 7. In Mark chapter 7, Jesus is having another disagreement with the religious leaders, with the Pharisees in particular, and the Pharisees are upset because the disciples are not washing their hands, and they are ceremonially defiled. They're not clean, right? And so Jesus talks about being clean in the eyes of God, and he talks about this subject of unclean versus clean. But then he uses this illustration. This is almost in the middle of the 7th chapter. He says, don't you understand? It's not what you eat and what goes into a person that makes them clean or unclean in the eyes of God. That's not it. It's what's in your heart and comes out that makes you clean or unclean. Then here's what the Bible says. As soon as Jesus said this, as soon as he said it's not what you eat, it's what comes out of your heart. As soon as he said that, the Bible says, in so saying, Jesus declared all foods clean. I'm going to say it one more time. In so saying, Jesus declared all foods clean. That's what the Bible teaches. And yet some people want to go back to some laws that were given to a specific group of people at a specific time for a specific reason and say, oh no, we have to go back to that. Listen, I know, especially this food thing, to a lot of people it doesn't seem like, well, it's not a big deal. Yeah. It is a big deal. You know why it's a big deal? Because Satan uses benign things and makes something out of them. I'm glad the passage doesn't stop there because it doesn't stop on a negative note. It just wants us to be forewarned. What's the warning here? Don't add to, don't take away, don't mess with it. Don't add to, don't take away, don't mess with it. But here's the positive part. He goes from there, and he's going to talk a little bit more about food since he talks about the fact that some people misunderstand this. He says, they tell us to abstain from certain food, but in verse 3, he says, that's the very food that God created to be received with thanksgiving by those who believe and who know what? What truth are we talking about here? It's the truth of what's taught in Scripture that's being perverted. He says they know the truth. Verse 4, for everything God created is good, and nothing is to be rejected if it is received with thanksgiving, because it is consecrated. It's a word I'm going to come back to in just a minute. Rich word. It is consecrated by what? By the Word of God and prayer. If the three things that make the gift go bad are adding to, taking away, and messing with it, the two things that keep it good are these: prayer and the Word, prayer and Scripture. Prayer, reaching out to God, and reading His Bible. The more we know His Word, the more we're focused on God, the more, you know what? We're going to catch it when somebody leaves something out. The more we know the Word, the more we're focused on God, the more it's going to bother us when somebody adds something to it that God didn't put there. The more we focus on God and keep our attention on Him and know His Word, the more we're not going to want to mess with anything He says, because He's God. Doesn't this just make sense? I hope it makes sense, because let's get to the illustration, because it's about food. I love illustration about food. Here's the illustration about food. It's all about mealtime. For mealtime, I don't know about you, I have to do a major cultural shift. Just a quick reminder, there were no fast foods, no delivered pizza, no Chinese food delivery. There was none of that stuff. food preparation and mealtime took a long time. No microwaves. Took a long time for food to be prepared. Okay? I'm sorry I'm belaboring that point. It's just near and dear to me. Anyway, it took a long time for food to be prepared. Okay, that's factor one I want you to think about with mealtime. Factor number two is no TV. No entertainment for the evening that you can just dial into. Mealtime was like this. Mealtime was something that took a lot of effort, a lot of people involved to prepare. And when you got together with people, it meant something. And boy, is that an understatement. It's one of the reasons Jesus got in trouble for who he ate with, because people understood it meant something. These are people that you feel like are family and are close to you. And Jesus would eat with people that other people wouldn't eat with, and so he got criticized for that, right? You're making a statement. These people are close to me, and here's what happened. You'd spend the evening together. It's not like, okay, let's hurry up and eat because my show's on. There is no show. This is the show. So if you're boring at meal times, we're in trouble, right? So here's what took place at the mealtime. I'm sorry this is taking so long. Here's what took place at mealtime. Took a long time to prepare it. You sit down, and before you start eating, by the way, Jewish custom before it became a Christian custom, carried on in early Christianity. You sat down to eat, and the first thing you did is you gave thanks. Some people call it saying grace, a lot of different other things. I just want to make sure we remember Philippians, the 4th chapter, you don't present your request without thanksgiving. Being thankful is so important. It's important to God. It ought to be important to us. You gave thanks, but after you gave thanks, you started the conversation. And I don't doubt that they talked about things that happened that day. They processed life. This was your opportunity to get wisdom. This was your opportunity to talk to people you really trust. Bounce off ideas, bounce off issues and stuff like that. But you know what they did before they got there? They gave thanks, and as the meal was being passed, one by one, they would take turns sharing the verse or the passage or the chapter that they had memorized that day from the Bible. Or if they hadn't memorized it that day, the one they'd been chewing on, meditating. The one that's just really meant something to them that day. So you pray, and then one by one, you start talking about the Word. And guess what? Conversations get going about the Word and how that Word applies to your life and how it applies to my life. And wow, I'm glad you brought that up. I'm glad you reminded me. And the whole evening starts to progress, but it progresses in a different direction than most people go. Hang on to that thought for just a minute. I want to tell you a story, and then you'll point at me so I'll go back, right? So I won't forget this, right? Here's the story. I know I'm old, and if you don't recognize this name, look for an old person like me or somebody older, okay? And ask them if they've heard of a guy named Paul Harvey. Paul Harvey. Paul Harvey's, back before podcasting, he was our guy, right? But Paul Harvey had these stories, the rest of the story, stuff like that. Ask an older person, what's your favorite Paul Harvey story? I'm going to tell you my favorite Paul Harvey story. It's a real one that happened to Paul Harvey. Paul Harvey was on vacation with his wife. They're traveling out west as they went through Arizona. On a Sunday morning, they stopped in a little country church, just a couple dozen people there. We're talking a little country church. He said as the minister stood up and started to give the morning lesson, sermon, on the inside, he tried not to yawn outside, it's like, oh boy, can I stay awake? One of those things. But as the message endured, so did he. And he felt himself getting drawn in. You know what the preacher was talking about that day? He was talking about baptism. And as the preacher continued to preach on baptism, and Paul started thinking about a lot of the different verses in the Bible and his own life, he said, I couldn't control myself. At the end of the sermon, he says, I walked down the aisle, and I came up to that preacher and said, I need to be baptized into Christ. Here's where I want to pick up Paul telling the story. He said, the preacher said to me, there's nothing miraculous about this water. Amen. Comes right out of the tap. There's no blessing that takes place or anything. It's just wet water, right? Which means it can be your pool It can be the ocean, it can be your bathtub, or it can be this. It's just water. That's not what makes it special. But the preacher told me there's nothing miraculous about the water. But when I descended into the depths and rose again, I knew something life-changing had just happened to me. Afterwards, I cried like a baby. The evolving joy of this simple act has made of my life as so immense as to be indescribable. Since totally yielding to Christ through baptism, my heart can't stop singing. I've shaken off the lifelong habit of fretting over small things. 1,000 little worries and apprehensions have simply evaporated from my life. You know what Paul Harvey is describing there? He's describing, I started a brand new life. Yeah, you did. Yeah, you did. You know, one of the ways the Bible describes this brand new life, they call it a consecrated life. Consecrated means sanctified. Okay, what does sanctified mean? Sanctified means holy. Okay, what does holy mean? Consecrated, sanctified, holy. It all means it's different. It's good. You know why we, as Christians, those of us who've been baptized in Christ, you know why we focus on God and His Word? You know why we all the time pray and bring Scripture to mind? Because there's a world we have to live in, and it's full of junk. Man, it's hard. But we, with other Christians, remind ourselves, that's not us. Yeah, we have to live there, but you know what? We got a different life. We got a different future. We got a different hope. It's a gift, and it's a great gift. It's a gift other people need to see. Nothing more, nothing less, nothing changed. Right?